Everybody loves free stuff. Google really loves free stuff. That's why when you Google some kind of software you want, be it a video player or a website platform or even a digital signage app, you'll see a lot of, quote, free software in the page one results. But is free digital signage software really free? Today we'll talk about this with Sean Matthews, President and CEO of Visix, to try and understand the pros and cons of free software and whether or not it's right for listeners who might be shopping around. Hi, Sean. How are you today?
I'm great, Derek. I appreciate you having me on the show, the podcast.
I'd like to thank Sean for talking to me today, and everybody out there for listening. Of course, remember that you can subscribe to this podcast and you can follow along with a full transcript complete with links on the Visix website. Go to Visix Resources Podcasts. This is digital signage done right. Whether you're new to digital signage or a seasoned pro, this podcast gives you practical advice about systems, communications, and content to better engage your audience. I'm Derek DeWitt, Communications Specialist for Visix. Welcome to Digital Signage Done Right. Okay, so free software. What are we talking about when we're talking about free software? Are we talking about freeware? Are we talking about shareware? What are we talking about with these companies that offer this?
I think this is what most digital signage users are actually looking for when you go out and Google free digital signage software. They're looking to download an app without paying for it and magically put, content up on screens. It has some sort of EULA associated with it, and you either agree to those terms or you don't. All kinds of collaborative associations and foundations that define what free software is, and you can maybe manipulate it, you can share it, you can do some things to it. Which is, certainly a good deal different than like open source free, right? And the whole open source thing, I feel like has been tied back to the Linux days, Mozilla, WordPress, those kinds of things where, it's truly open source, it's free software, but, people can add to it, they can add features, it can be codified and then shared with others. And there's usually some sort of managerial group that exists out on the web that's actually managing those feature sets, comments on it, and bundles it up so it can be passed along to others. So I think really, in short, when you get down to it, people are going out on the web and looking for free digital signage software, and they just want to download some freeware that they can use to put stuff up on screens.
Right. They're not, because like you said, there's a whole sort of ecosystem out there of this stuff. I read once that all open source software is freeware, but not all freeware is open source. People aren't really usually looking to go in and change the code of the CMS or whatever the software is that allows you to schedule and maybe even create content. They're just looking for something that they can use, like Microsoft Word or, something like that.
Yeah, I think that, our experience with open source digital signage software, the only time we've actually ever seen it really used might be at some sort of institute of higher learning, which is like an engineering school, like an MIT or a Georgia Tech or something like that, where, there's a engineering effort to go customize some sort of existing open source platform to add feature sets to it that are almost specific to that institution. And that's the only time that I've ever seen that sort of open source digital signage CMS used for real, in an institutional environment.
Right. And just so people listening out there, you probably already know if you've been following along this podcast for through all the many episodes we've had. But if you're new to all this, you might need to know that when we're talking about digital signage software, we're really just talking about a CMS or content management system. That is the core software suite that allows you to put stuff up there. So, of course, the question would be, hey, look, I've got, a restaurant, or I've got a gas station, or I've got a pizza parlor, or I've got even an office. If I can get a CMS for free, well, why the hell shouldn't I?
It's a great question, Derek. And the examples that you just cited, if I have my own independent gas station or independent restaurant, a free CMS actually might work for you. I'm just being brutally honest. But at any sort of enterprise scale, truly, let's say at the institutional communication level or a multi-store retail operation, your ability to import, schedule, and deliver content to various various endpoints at different points in time and be specific in terms of what type of content gets where. I don't think that there's any sort of true free product that's out there. And I think that the term free is pretty loose. I mean, it could mean a limited free trial that might expire at some point, beyond your control. It could be a version of some sort of commercial product that has very limited features, which again might work for your independent gas station. And often you can only get free software if you buy their hardware, or you agree to some sort of file storage limits, or you agree that only one login or one user account can be created. So, when I look at this stuff online, there's a lot of bait and switch stuff. And I just feel like that when you look at what's out there for free, most companies that are in our industry are using that as a Google term or phrase so that they pop up higher in the organic response.
Right. And as always, buyer beware. You got to read that fine print, because free for a certain value of free.
Yeah. I mean, and if you think about companies like Visix, and, we have competitors in our same category, we charge for our product. We charge for our software. We charge for our hardware in our professional services, because we have spent decades not only building the source code, but documenting how to use it. There are learning resource materials. There are people on our staff that are professional services people that we pay for to help support our clients. It's like any other business system that you might employ in your organization, whether it be an ERP, Salesforce automation, a telephone system, if you want to look at it that way, or a communication system like Teams or Slack or any of those things. They're not free because they have to be fully supported in an institutional environment.
Right. And of course, there are other things to consider, improvements to the user interface, new features, obviously constant bug fixes, online security issues, all these sorts of things have to be kept in mind. It kind of seems to me like, yes, I suppose Office A could use just Microsoft Excel and a calculator, and that could be enough, though I don't think that's going to work for a larger scale company. They're going to need a much more comprehensive accounting software system.
Yep, that's correct. And I think that when you look at what you're giving up when you go get something that's free, you're giving up your own personal data and information. And in most cases, you're going to get pinged with email. You might fill out a bunch of forms with contact information that gets sold at some point. Again, nothing is free, and you're going to give up something.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because the company who's offering quote unquote free software, they're making money somehow, and it could very well be that they're just selling your data.
Yeah, the reality is there is no such thing as a nonprofit digital signage software development firm. At least I've not found one.
Digital Signage is not one of the NGOs out there on the list.
That's correct. If you find one, please let me know, and I might support them.
Let's look at some of the pros and cons of free digital signage software. Let's kind of drill down into some of the specifics. Like, what are some advantages? Obviously, the first advantage is that at least initially, I'm not paying anything.
Yeah, and if you're just looking to save money, that might be the way to go. You might actually just want something that's very simple for your single store restaurant, your single store gas station, as we mentioned earlier. And if you just have one screen that you're trying to put something up on, you might be able to upload some templates or whatever and just get something up on screen. The question I would ask you is, why are you doing that, right? Is there some sort of, sales advantage? Is there a point of sale transaction that's going to occur because you have this electronic sign? And I'm just not convinced that just because other gas stations have electronic signs that you might need to have one, because what they're doing at those franchised, chain gas stations is they have professional content creators that are creating elaborate buy one, get one videos that are spinning on screen and actually might cause someone to buy, an extra Slurpee or whatever, right? And, if you just have this small deployment, you might be better off just uploading slides to PowerPoint and having those play on screen versus even trying this free CMS. I'm just not sure what the value of that CMS is for this little single screen deployment.
That scenario where you've got, a laptop with a cable going into a flat screen TV, that's my digital signage system. It's not automated. There's no way to schedule things. Like you need to make a change. You need to go in there and make it. Your digital signage is down while you're doing that. It might in the long run end up being a headache.
Yeah. And if you think about what digital signage really is, and if we talk about the sort of the negatives of the freeware sort of thing, maybe some of the limitations to this freeware offering, you have to understand what a digital signage system really is and what it takes to make it work. It's not just a TV and some sort of app on your laptop, right? You have a content creation tool. You have a content management tool, which allows you to schedule when and where it's going to play and causes the content to remove itself from the schedule when it's expired. Then you have a media player, which is a piece of hardware and software associated with it. And then you have the display itself. So, there are lots of components to this. It is a system. It is not a single app that you would just use on a tablet or a phone or even on a laptop. So if you want to schedule messages to a display, you actually have to have a content management system, because if you create something in PowerPoint, PowerPoint does not have any scheduling tools associated with it. It just plays a constant loop in basically like a kiosk mode. So, that's where digital signage comes into play. You have to have at least two apps, which is a scheduling app and then a playback app. In fact, you might need three apps if you want to create, complex or elegant looking layouts on screen. So it's just like, you need VLC or some other decoder to watch videos, on your laptop or whatever. You need something that plays content on a screen. You need a media player. So, man, even if you find, some sort of, free software, you download it, you create a bunch of other stuff, you're going to have different things in between that content and the display itself. You have to decide who's going to create the content, who's going to manage the content. And most of these free guys aren't going to allow you to download multiple copies. They want to grab some contact information from you so that they can go upsell you on other things. So most of these things are hosted in the cloud. It's not some little app you download it. You're going to have to access it via the web. The device is going to have access to the web, which is not the end of the world. But if all of a sudden you start to get to 2, 3, 4 screens, it becomes much more complicated in terms of how you're going to manage when and where that content's going to be delivered. So, the free stuff just has limited features.
I was also thinking, like, let's say you wanted a video wall. A video wall is much more than just a whole bunch of TVs sitting next to each other, with playing PowerPoint. It's a much more complicated thing than that. And if you're doing something like that, especially, you need to have something that's purpose built.
Yeah, that's correct. And the limited feature set can come back to bite you. It might be a good way to maybe get started if you don't really understand this concept. The reality is that most people have never run a television station. And if you compare this concept to a cable or television station, there's an entire staff dedicated to ensuring that content is relevant, it is refreshed, it's timely, it's pertinent, it's all of those things. And someone has to be dedicated to doing it. Just putting messages up on a screen, that's probably not going to influence your audience in any way, shape, or form.
Right. Not anymore. Maybe 10 years ago. But nowadays, because digital signage has become so ubiquitous, it's everywhere, that it's a little bit like we say we're living in this golden age of television. Back in the 80s, maybe there were 2 or 3 shows that were, actually worth watching. And now there's so much we can't even keep up. So you need to keep sort of pushing the outside of the envelope in order to get people to even give your offering a try, because why should I waste my time with you? I always say with digital signage, we're competing with people's phones. If what you're putting up there isn't as interesting or as attractive as what's on my phone, I'm just going to use my phone.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately part of the limited feature set that you're going to find in free offerings. Playback is typically, just full screen. So it basically looks like PowerPoint. There are no, visual attractors or hooks, to suck people in, whether it be news feeds, date, time, weather. Everybody wants to know what the weather is. All of those hooks are used to keep the audience engaged with the sign. And television and particularly cable news networks have been doing this for 20 years. They're using the scrolling ticker across the bottom of the screen to keep you engaged, because you might not be interested in what the hosts or talking heads are talking about at that moment. But if you continue to follow that ticker, it's related to unrelated events associated with what's on screen at that moment. So they're using that technique to keep you engaged. And, if you think about what it looks like on screen, you're often bound to templates, and it's the same sort of concept you would find in PowerPoint. The idea of HTML5 delivery, because it sounds cool. HTML5 is a really, really powerful standard, but it also has limitations in terms of what can be delivered on screen. And it often looks like web pages, which web pages were designed for personal consumption, not public consumption or large scale consumption. There's typically no data integration with freeware or any sort of free software, meaning you can't connect to databases. So even if we have our one store restaurant and our menu is maintained in the point of sale, application, there's no way to go get that data. And then the reality is, when you're constrained to these templates and this no data connection or no data interactivity, you might not even be able to fully convey your message. So they're just constraints. I'm not saying it's the end of the world, but it's just constraint.
Enterprise level software is designed to be enterprise level, and so it does have efficiencies, and it has been improved over time. So it kind of, in the long run, ends up kind of saving money, because money isn't just how much I'm getting charged on the corporate credit card. It's also work hours, it's effort, it's all of those things have to be factored in, I think, when you're thinking about how much something actually costs.
Yeah, and beyond the features, Derek, we can talk about all kinds of things as it relates to what sort of services are available. Are those services free? Is technical support free? And what does technical support look like? We've spent decades, again, developing our product offering and our service offering. And if we look at things like training, what sort of training do they offer? Is there any sort of LMS? Is it so easy that you can teach yourself? And if we think about, if it's so easy that we can teach ourselves, is it as simple as some apps that we might download on our phone for our own personal use? And if we make mistakes inside our personal use, nobody else gets to see it, right? But if we make mistakes in something that gets published, everybody gets to see it. So when you look at the services, it's just not training. Professional services to help you brand and reinforce what your brand looks like on these displays. Are there content creation people available to help you customize what it looks like, so it looks like your restaurant or your gas station, right? What about consulting? Is someone going to, for free, help embark, best business practices as it relates to this type of communication, and help you, measure the success of the time and energy that you're putting into this free application?
Yes, that's true. I also think that, obviously there are almost certainly not going to be any tools that allow you to measure the effectiveness of things. Was this successful? Was this not successful? Like, again, you'd have to sit there and, I guess, just watch people look at the screen and take notes. That's how you could tell, because they're almost certainly, with these very simplified CMS software solutions, there's not going to be that kind of measurement capability.
That's a whole different piece of the puzzle, Derek. It's not just the analytics of whether or not, people looked at the screen, but did the screen and the content that's on that screen cause the viewer to change their behavior? And did you create an entire campaign that would allow you to measure whether or not that human behavior was changed as a result of that material being on screen? It is not a simple concept in terms of measuring the success of this sort of thing. It's the same thing as if you spent money on a billboard on an interstate, right? Are you just spending money for your name to be up on that billboard? Or is the billboard provider offering analytical analysis of how many cars passed by that billboard and how did it affect your business? Like, did you really create a campaign that would allow you to measure what was on that billboard and how it impacted your business? I'm not saying it's rocket science, but it's not a part of your normal business analysis.
And obviously, technical support would be, like you said, what does it look like? Is it good? Is there any?
Yeah, I mean, and again, if there's a human being on the other side of that, communication tool that you're using to try to get support with, that human being is not free. We all know that. I mean, in a world that we live in, particularly today, that people are struggling to even find people and paying more and more and more to get them on staff. So can you actually talk to somebody if you have technical problems, or even you don't understand how the platform really works? Is the documentation online? Is there online help? Is it just FAQs? How often is the technology even updated when there are changes that are beyond the free company's integration? Meaning, if there are changes to the operating system underneath and it adversely affects the software that you're using, when do those bug fixes come out and who's responsible for them?
Well, that's true. I always think of, how much of a panic there was when all these software platforms were based on XP. And then finally Microsoft said, hey, everybody, XP's going away. And everybody went, uh-oh. We need to upgrade. And I think I watched a lot of software, not digital signage software, but other kinds of software basically go away because they were like, we can't afford at our price point to reconfigure our software to be compliant with Vista and later Windows versions. So I guess we're just folding up shop.
What you're talking about now, I mean, is really the flip side of free, which is, paying for digital signage software, or any type of software that's related to the enterprise. I mean, commercial vendors like Visix, we have enormous, financial incentives in the form of subscriptions that must be renewed because, like any software enterprise, we are not looking for client churn, right? We don't want to have clients churn and turn over and go somewhere else. We don't. So we're going to release patches and features and all the things that we need to be responsive to our install base because they're paying for those subscriptions. And for us, that's how we survive, grow, and remain relevant in the markets we serve. And, when you look at things like enterprise level, applications that can scale to any number of users, I mean, you've got to have a robust feature set in that model, whether it's, in the cloud or on premise, single sign-on tool sets, regular updates to address security, bugs, new features. I mean, you name it. And of course, if you integrate with other systems so that you have data integrations, those other companies are going to have technology changes and code changes that we have to respond to. Because in the world of software integration, even if you're an integration partner, none of us are privy to every single change that one of our partners is going to make. It's just not possible. And then we would always be reacting to whatever changes they're making. So, I mean, I could go on and on about the reason that you would pay for things, but the reality is that any enterprise product is worth investing in, not only money, but also time and people, so that your investment actually has a return on investment. It has an impact on your organization. And it's either more productivity, a greater sense of community, or cultural reinforcement in your organization, or it might even be an uptick in sales. But those are the things that you're looking to impact when you're using a digital signage product. And I don't think, and I can't envision a product that does those types of things for free.
Okay, so look, my boss told me, go out and find free digital signage software. That's it. What do I do? How do I do it?
Well, first, you need to start with a list of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And you have to state that first. Forget what other features and other things that they offer. You need to get a demo. You've got to go out and get a demo. You need to ask for a pilot. You need for them to train you for how to use that pilot so that you can determine whether or not it's actually going to support your strategy. And, you need to know ultimately, can you scale the product? Can you add users, playlists, screens? Is it secure? And how is it secure? Give us a written definition of your security. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but fundamentally, you have to define your strategy and then see if those products actually can support or help you implement that strategy.
Well, that all makes absolute sense to me. I hope it makes sense to the people out there listening. Any final words of wisdom for those who would seek the free route?
I would say this: don't spend your time, which is money, which is not free, adapting to the product. You need to go find and choose a product that meets your needs up front, period.
All right. Well, so free is not necessarily free. You got to check out all the things in there. What are the little hooks? Because there is no company out there that is using digital signage software to make the world a better place. Everybody's in it trying to get some kind of profit. So you need to figure out what it is that they're profiting from and maybe consider going a different route. As always, great to talk to you, Sean. So many insights. Who knew digital signage was so interesting?
Well said, Derek.
All right. Thank you very much for talking to me today. And thank you, everybody out there, for listening to this episode of Digital Signage Done Right. Hey, want more free stuff? Then head to the resources section of Visix.com for free masterclass guides, blogs, videos, and more to help you with your digital signs. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review of this episode and connect with us on social media.